Tell me how you got involved in this in the first place.
Yeah, not the usual story. It was not the typical academic flow that led me into this science. It was my own personal illness and need for a solution. But it's the one thing that you will always use to answer every question. Because whether it comes to how do I exercise, how do I eat, why do I have eczema, going into menopause doesn't feel so good. So I would say the area that does need the most support and is the most sort of broken in the healthcare system is female hormone health. We work with a lot of pro athletes, and some of these athletes, this is a very consistent thing where you've probably seen football players in Europe, Olympic sprinters, uh, swimmers, they kind of drop dead at 35. And like, what happened? Not all of them, but this unusual thing where it happens with those types of athletes. And best doctors, best trainers, best everything. Why did this person have a heart attack? Right? You would think that exercise would prevent that. So the choice of their exercise for everybody else in their team seemed to be incredible. Look at Ronaldo. The guy's, what, 40 now, and he doesn't, I mean, there aren't very many 40-year-olds that look like that, right?
I'm Dan Metcalfe. Thank you for tuning into the Born SuperHuman podcast. I'm so proud of the guests and stories that we bring to you, and I know that you'll enjoy what we have ahead. Please like, subscribe, and follow. It really makes a huge difference in our ability to continue these conversations being brought to you. And if you feel the passion behind Born Superhuman, please share it with your friends and family and leave a comment. I read every one. Now, let's get on with the show. Okay, so Cash, great to have you here. Really excited because we both speak on the biohacking circuit, but we've never run across each other. But what really caught my attention with you was the honesty and integrity that you've been doing in your promotions of the DNA company. And so I had to reach out and see, one, would I be able to interview you and get the incredible knowledge you have, but also visiting your 1 hour class that ended up being 3 hours as the intro because of all the attention you put in. I ended up signing up for your course because I really wanted to learn and understand what you're bringing to everybody. So as an intro, tell me how you got involved in this in the first place.
Yeah, not the usual story. It was not the typical academic flow that led me into this science. It was my own personal illness and need for a solution. So I'm 44 now, and when I was 38, all of a sudden, never having needed a doctor previous, other than when I was a kid and had my tonsils removed, really never needed a doctor, right? And all of a sudden, eczema, psoriasis, gut issues, depression, migraines, which was really intense, all at the same time. So my question in the Canadian healthcare system that I'm a part of was, why? What did I do? I must have done something. It doesn't make sense that all these things all happen at once. And the answer I got from 5 different doctors giving me 5 different pills was kind of like, that's not what we do here. What we do is we diagnose and then we manage it. And that's not the words they use, but that's the message I received. And so that pushed me down this journey of healing myself, learning everything from traditional Chinese medicine to naturopathy to homeopathy, to eventually finding clues in my own unique genome that there was bits of my human instruction manual, which is what the genetic code is, that were just broken and weren't working properly. And so the exact same things that I was doing, that my business partner, my family were doing, made me sick, but didn't make them sick. And that's why I believed I had what I had, because I wasn't doing anything different than anyone else. So that was the big aha moment. I walked away from my business, started paying for the research, built a company out of it, and now I don't even run the company anymore. I do what you said, which is I advocate. I go out there and speak and teach because I just feel like the world needs to know.
No, it's great because we've grown up. I've known the word DNA for years.
Yeah.
Never really looked into it. What does DNA mean for the general people and how does it actually influence us?
So it's a series of acids that are, if I were to summarize, AGTC, these 4 letters, just like zeros and ones in computer code, AGTC makes up human code. And the human genome, or your DNA, is 22,000 sets of sequences. So there's all these lines of code. Each one is thousands of letters long. And sometimes somewhere in that code, there's a spelling mistake. and consistently within the same location on a gene, that's where we know to look for a spelling mistake. And when there's a spelling mistake, that DNA, those four sets of acids, the AGTC, aren't instructing properly. And so the biological job, making a hormone, getting rid of a toxin, making a heart cell, isn't happening properly because the instruction is broken. And now all of a sudden, the same thing that was not a threat to somebody else is a threat to you, or you have a superpower that other people don't have, right? So that's what it is. It's essentially 50 trillion cells make up the human body. Every single cell has DNA in it. DNA is the manual that your cells read to know how to do their jobs. And we all have some slight variances to what that manual looks like.
Yeah, and I just went through my DNA through your company and got my results last week.
Oh, cool.
It was very eye-opening. But one of the things that makes it that you grabbed me with was one thing that you said that I've now said to many different people: the DNA you're born with is the DNA you die with.
Right.
It doesn't really change through the time. I know they're going through DNA therapy or gene therapy and trying to find different ways to affect it. But how does that affect somebody that's never been involved in any health industry to sit there and go, this is something I'd be really interested to find out?
Yeah, so it's the one thing that you only need to understand once, but it's the one thing that you will always use to answer every question. Because whether it comes to how do I exercise, how do I eat, why do I have eczema, I'm going into menopause doesn't feel so good. There's a lot of solutions and a lot of paths you could go down to solve the problem, but why not just pick the one you actually need? And this is where we have a healthcare system and even a wellness system that's all a lot based on trial and error and one size fits all. Here's a thing that we know worked on some people. Hopefully it works on you. But if you dive into the biology of why the person has the problem they're trying to fix, it's not always the same path to get there, right? And let me give you an example. We work with a lot of pro athletes, and some of these athletes, this is a very consistent thing where you've probably seen football players in Europe, Olympic sprinters, swimmers, they kind of drop dead at 35. And like, what happened? Not all of them, but this unusual thing where it happens with those types of athletes. And best doctors, best trainers, best everything. Why did this person have a heart attack? Right? You would think that exercise would prevent that. So the choice of their exercise for everybody else on their team seemed to be incredible. Look at Ronaldo. The guy's what, 40 now, and he doesn't, I mean, there aren't very many 40-year-olds that look like that, right?
Sure.
So the work he did was exactly what his body responded to positively. Now, if you have bad genes around removing oxidants, so when you get into cardiovascular activity, you're taking in more oxygen. You're putting your body under what's called oxidative stress, which for some people, no problem. They remove those oxidants, which means breathe oxygen, mitochondria turns it into energy. That oxygen becomes an oxidant. It's like the smoke, the pollution needs to be removed. Some people don't do that job. Now go pick a career where oxidative stress is your daily reality, running, 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 then you overload your system with oxidants that cause inflammation. And for most of us, cardiovascular tissue is the first to respond to inflammation because we can actually, with genes, determine how robust your cardiovascular hardware is in terms of the endothelium, which is the inner lining. And if that's also doing poorly, which it is in some of these people that we're dealing with, then no surprise that all those oxidants from all your oxidative stress, from all the cardiovascular activity, cause inflammation of the wrong part of your body, which then leads to a cholesterol response, which then leads to plaque, which nobody's looking for at that age, which all of a sudden leads to cardiac arrest. So to answer your question, you know, the one size fits all advice of go run on a treadmill might be great on 8 out of 10 people, but for the two people that it isn't good for, is going to age them faster and kill them.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was involved in the soccer world on the Olympic program for many years and training
Yeah.
players, and we've seen an uptake on the amount of athletes that are suffering actually during
Yeah.
games. And then a lot of suppositions that come out as to why it is, whether it's because of the COVID, the vaccine, numbers of different things we will talk about in a little while. But why is it the doctors aren't investigating more into the DNA of each person then, or is it a trend that's changing?
So it's changing on an individual level, meaning post-COVID, we have a wave of doctors that are coming to us for training, and we have a curriculum, and they want to learn, but the system doesn't want them to know. So you have a system, like if you go speak to the guys that are doing well in the United States in the system, their motivations are not how their patients feel. I've met them, I know them, they're my clients. They come to me to help them with their health. Like, why aren't you using your own system if it works so well? Right? Because they know what their system is designed for. The longer you're sick, the more profitable you are. Right? So managing a symptom without ever asking the question, why did it happen, is the most profitable way to deal with health. But it's also the least effective when it comes to chronic disease. It's incredible when it comes to acute care, break your arm or, get cancer out of your body. But is cancer going to come back? If you don't ask why it happened in the first place, likely yes, right? So this is where we're at, is you have a system that has all the wrong incentives, depending what side of the fence you're on. Maybe it's all the right incentives, right? And so how do you then intertwine yourself in that system when your solution is saying most of the spending doesn't need to happen? Because you have a $4.3 trillion healthcare industry in the United States alone. 90%, this is the actual number. The CDC says 90% of that money is spent on chronic disease management. Most of that doesn't need to happen, right? And so this is why the answers aren't provided. And, guys like me are challenged regularly because can turn the system on its head overnight when you tell people that disease is optional.
So behind your um, building, the founder CEO of the DNA company, and you had your own personal drive to find out. But often we get to a point where, okay, I've solved my problem. I began to understand what, let me go backwards. Everyone that I've spoken with that is doing great changes in the world has a passion and a reason beyond themselves. Do you have anything personal within you that drove you to the level where you are now challenged?
So day one, for me, it was me healing myself. Then it was getting my arthritic ridden mother out of bed. She literally couldn't move, and now she literally goes to a gym, exercises, right? Getting my anxiety-induced niece who couldn't function or go to school, thriving, applying for university. Then getting my friends off of medication. And then for the first time, purpose outweighed the business. Right? I'm entrepreneur, it's all I've ever done. And it was always about how hard can I work and how much money can I make. And that's what felt like success, especially the people that you're surrounded by in that entrepreneurial world. Then I got to a very different world where that didn't matter. That was more of a byproduct. To the point where I walked away from my company and I'm not the CEO anymore. I don't run it because I realized that the investors need someone that's going to grow it, but the world needs someone that's going to advocate for them. And so that's the path I chose. And so never thought I would be in this position. But there's this, in Japan, Okinawa is one of the blue zones where people live forever. The 100+ is very common there. And if you look at their habits and why they get there, one of the major ones is what they call ikigai, which is sense of purpose. And when you truly, with your heart, your gut, and your brain align with, and you're honest to yourself on why you wake up every morning, it's a longevity tool because your entire being is working towards a purpose as opposed to stressing over profit, right? That it all comes to automatically anyway. So yeah, to your point, very different mission now than I was on a few years ago.
Yeah, I feel that from you as well. Again, when I've watched you talk or come to some of your meetings, and there's a genuinity about there. And one of the things I was with a podcast, Dr. Daniel Amen the other
Yeah.
day, and he talked about how there's always that purpose that comes in, and yet he had a fear of being disliked. And so it's like going against the grain, but it's actually going against the grain that actually elevates you to the higher levels because people will stop. Like myself, when I saw you on Instagram and you said that one thing about I don't agree with everything in biohacking.
Yeah.
And it made me stop and look because if we just follow, we're following the system, and yet is the system set up for us? So with your experience, I know you've trained thousands upon thousands of people, or looked at their DNA and helped, correct what's going on. What is the most common issue right now that you see? There's been a huge change in the world in the last couple.
Yeah.
What are people's?
I would say there's two answers because one is more specifically for women. So I would say the area that does need the most support and is the most sort of broken in the healthcare system is female hormone health. where it's taken for granted as, well, you're supposed to have problems, you're a woman, right? When it's much more actionable than that and much more predictable. Also, if you understood genetically what your body was doing to make hormones, how toxic they are, how you detoxify those toxic hormones, there's a whole cascade to look at. So in that regard, the number one issue that is under the radar that is driving most female health problems is what we call estrogen toxicity. So a lot of men and women make different loads of estrogen, what volume, and some are more estrogen dominant, so they make a little too much. And after the estrogen is produced, there's genes that then convert that estrogen into a byproduct. And there's three options: 2-hydroxyestrogen, 4-hydroxy, and 16-hydroxy. And 2 is very protective. It's good for the bone, good for the brain, good for the heart. 4 and 16 cause inflammation. And there's a lot of women that are estrogen dominant and estrogen toxic, and they are now living in a world where everything amongst them is a hormone or endocrine disruptor, everything an estrogen mimic. So now they're taking birth control pills for a decade. Their Teflon coated frying pan, their yoga pants with forever chemicals, their plastics, their perfumes, the 500 plus, this is the actual number, 500 plus chemicals an average woman puts on her body every day between all the personal care products and cosmetics, right? In the United States, the number is close to 1,500, but the global number is 500, right? So add all that up, and all these things are hormone disruptors, which means they're occupying estrogen docking stations so that the estrogen is now free flowing. And if it's toxic, causing inflammation over and over and over and over again. We have people that were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis where we told them, you actually don't have that. You have inflammation from estrogen. We have people that were diagnosed with Lyme disease saying, sorry, the reason your treatment's not working is you don't have that. You have estrogen toxicity and the wrong environmental input. So that's a big one, right? The second big one that's somewhat consistent is and it's the same theme where the reality has changed. So everything around our core antioxidative and detox pathways, so our ability to deal with environmental toxins. Now, you would think, okay, women make too many toxic estrogens. A lot of people are getting sick because they don't detoxify properly. Why would they be wired that way genetically? Because genetically, your ancestors are of the last 250,000 years, 250,000 years, meaning genetically, no changes. The vast majority of that time did not look like today. We have not evolved, we have not changed genetically. And so you have 140,000 chemicals added to humanity since the 1970s, but the DNA has not changed. So our detox capacity hasn't changed. So what we're seeing is that the people with the worst detox capacity are kind of in the canary in the coal mine role that are showing us how sick we are, but they get hit faster and first. And those are the people that are coming for the most help because they're stuck. Like no medication works. They have not one thing, they have 5 different things because they're so inflamed from all these environmental toxins that they don't detoxify. So that just tells us that all of us are struggling. We just don't know because we're not getting an instant pain response. It's going to linger and cause cancer 10 years down the road, some other disease down the road, you know?
So with what you were saying about the female suffering from hormone therapy, or I should say the change going through menopause, is hormone therapy then something they didn't need to go through if they understood what's happening with their DNA and then could adapt to it? Or is hormone
Yeah.
therapy still something they should do?
So there is a lot you can do to prep. To your point, if someone started thinking about menopause early, so we now have perimenopause is a very real thing. Most doctors still don't believe it even exists. But why does it exist and why is it so prolific? Because of all the hormone disruption. So all the menopause symptoms are starting early, and we have this perimenopause phase. So in that perimenopause phase, that's the time where you need to prep. So all the detox work, all the hormone balancing work, the foods, the supplements, the activity, the muscle building, all that needs to be done in preparation to get into menopause for a smooth ride. And we've seen over and over again that it makes a big difference. Now, if someone's in menopause, it does not need to be the roller coaster that it's made out to be. That is a clear indicator of your hormones being disrupted, of too much estrogen toxicity, or not enough hormones. So I think anybody could benefit from BHRT, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I don't think it's a bad thing. What I do know and see over and over again is I'll work with the breast cancer patient or an ovarian cancer patient and tell them that I'm sorry, the hormones you're taking caused it, right? But not everyone gets that answer. Certain women, so a very commonly prescribed hormone is called estradiol. That's what a lot of women get. It's a more potent version of estrogen, so doctors like to use it. Makes sense. Um, there's a gene called CYP1B1 that when it sees estradiol in your body, converts it into 4-hydroxyestrogen. 4-hydroxyestrogen, prior to menopause, you would have eliminated it in your menstrual cycle, your period, but you don't have a period anymore, right? So your body tries to protect you and it stores it in fatty tissue, including your breast tissue. And you have this inflammatory load that's being overweighted because you're taking hormones, fueling that toxic pathway, causing damage to breast tissue, which eventually leads to breast cancer, right? So now this is not every woman, and this is why the a study can prove whatever you want a study to prove. It depends who's in it and who's funding it and all these sorts of questions. So if I take all the women with estrogen toxicity out, I can prove that hormones don't cause any problems. If I have 100% women with estrogen toxicity, you will be banned by the FDA tomorrow because every single one of them will get breast cancer. So it's all about bio-individuality. That's the whole purpose of what I sort of scream from the rooftops, is that there's no such thing as what's right and wrong. It's what's right and wrong for me. It's not the same answer.
So this was one of the things when sent my test in, I'm doing the masterclass with you, I think next week. And I'm very excited.
Okay.
I've spent hours going through already my stuff and listening to everything.
Yeah.
There's a certain mindset that we have where I believe I'm born superhuman. I've been dumbed down. Everything I needed was there, and society's kept me into a box. But I've been fortunate enough to break out of that. Then when I started looking at my genes and going, I'm missing that one. This one's
Yeah.
rare, but why does my skin age? Oh, because I didn't have one of the genes one of them's missing. I'm starting looking at that stuff. I had to very quickly shift my mindset from I'm not as good as I thought I was to hang on a minute, look at what I've been able to overcome with
Yeah.
some of those, but now I could super boost it. So one of the issues we have is people prefer to live in ignorance than they do
Yeah.
to know because they're fearful. How would you address someone that says, well, I got these problems, but I don't really want to know?
Yeah, so there's two parts there. The part about like the safety of not making a change, what's familiar feels safe and comfortable, and safety for the nervous system is where people like to be, versus that one step to change and make progress is very uncomfortable. But it's only the first step that's uncomfortable. That's what people need to know is get that pain over with, and the rest feels great, right? So you have to just push beyond that, getting out of the safe zone. Right? The body doesn't like change. We are not designed to thrive. We're designed to not die. We're designed to survive, right? That's what the human body is designed for. So it doesn't like change. So that's one. Second thing is this thought around, well, I don't want to know if I'm getting Alzheimer's. I don't want a DNA review, right? So that I agree with that. And that is what genetics is, which is the old way to interpret. Meaning, this gene means you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. This gene means you have a 70% chance of breast cancer, and that's it. Good luck, right? Versus functional genomics, which is this gene says that elevated risk of Alzheimer's. Now let's go look at all these other genes to determine what's going on with your gut, what's going on with your detox, what's going on with your brain structure, what's going on with your hormones. This is why 80% of dementia cases are in women because of the toxic estrogens that also cause brain inflammation. So it's not about a prescription, 80% chance of whatever. It's more about this is the thing we now need to prioritize and put your time into where you get the biggest ROI, and ignore the other stuff because that's already doing well. You don't need to take supplements for this and do exercises for that. Your body already does it well. Focus on this. This is your Achilles heel. Focus on, and so if you think of it that way, that question of I don't want to know comes from the belief that there's nothing you can do about it, right? Versus tell me, but also give me the plan so it doesn't happen. That's what people need to know, that it's a priority, not a prescription. And once you know, it should never happen.
So with that being said, and I fully agree because I just experienced it myself, thinking I was something and then
Yeah.
seeing it and going, okay, now I got to change my plan. I love red meat. I shouldn't be eating red meat. I should be eating, organ meat and these
Yeah.
different things. At what age, if you were born with the DNA and it's the same one you're going to live with, at what age should we start getting genetic testing?
So it applies at any age because at any age we have different problems to solve. And all we're saying, this is the guide to just not make a mistake. So my kids have been tested. In terms of their intellect and how we plan for their courses, athletics, how are their bodies going to develop? I already know all that. I already know in this house who's going to be an entrepreneur, who's going to be an engineer, who's going to be an artist. It's clear. I understand the neurochemicals of the brain, how they think, how they perceive, and where they would thrive and where they would feel frustrated and start to use words like anxiety and depression, etc., that maybe aren't actually there. Then you get into sort of the fertility age where there's a whole other set of problems, right? Well, I guess past there's also the pubescent age, like dealing with all of the challenges of development, and then there's fertility, which is sort of becoming an adult and thriving in your career, and hormones start becoming a major concern, energy, exercise, diet become a major concern. Then you get into that sort of perimenopause, whether you're a man or woman, that age, like say 35 to 50-ish, right? Um, where there's different concerns. It's like you're set in your career, now you want to enjoy life and you want to, so the priorities change, but there's never a time when there isn't something new you need to work on, right? And so the answer is, I just know how to always make the right decision, because if I know what my DNA is saying, there's no trial and error. I don't need to test 5 things before I find the one that works. And I don't need to do things that I don't even need to do because my body's already doing a good job, right?
Yeah, one of the issues, again, I have a non-profit organization for kids. I put hundreds of kids into colleges, and it's been
Oh,
a fantastic journey. But there's also that self-discovery.
yeah,
Through self-discovery, we get experiences of what we like. I tried multiple different sports, or modern, going from soccer into show business, into gym ownership, into, discovering brain health, all these different things, which was part of my journey that makes me unique. With a parent knowing, like you do with your children, what their predisposition to be successful, is there a risk there that parents could turn around and force their kids without the full life experience?
yeah, we'll see that the helicopter momming is a very cultural reality today, right? It kind of like compensating for what we didn't get, and it becomes the helicopter mom or dad, and we
Sure.
see it everywhere. So that's not the right way to implement. The right way to implement is you have to make decisions anyway. You might as well make the right decision and get out of trial and error. You have to plan anyway. You might as well know how somebody's wired and make the right plan. So the whole point is to just not to create a sense of anxiety of like something is coming, and now the whole every activity is wrapped around that something is coming. It's more around action. So anxiety comes from not taking action. If I tell you that you have a risk for dementia or your child has a risk for dementia, and you spend the rest of your time helicoptering to deal with every little thing because there's risk of dementia, versus lay out a structured plan, which is the exact thing their biology needs to address this thing that you found, and then you can trust that you've dealt with it,
Hmm.
right? Biology doesn't lie, the solutions don't lie, DNA doesn't lie. The reason that you're scared and have anxiety to begin with also isn't a lie. So if you know the risk is real, then the solution and the biology being tweaked is also real. So rather than every single question and every single activity it's not all related, right? So that's all I would say is that uh, make the work and then sorry, plan the work and then work the plan. You gotta do it as opposed to having anxiety over it.
It's interesting because you were talking about the helicopter mother, father, it's,
Yeah,
and I look back at the thousands upon thousands of kids that I've worked with on the soccer field. It comes down to, do I let them still do what they love? Because there's a love of soccer, but they're never going to be great at it because
yeah,
physiologically they're not made up. And yet I see these kids being destroyed by parents because
yeah,
they're pushing them to be something great that they want them to be, but the kid
yeah.
isn't genetically made up to be great at it. So the solution there is sit back, enjoy the journey, let the child self-discover, but don't put extra pressure. But you can always guide them without the stress and anxiety into arenas as they learn.
Yeah. Or you've just discovered why. Maybe this child, for example, you want them playing soccer, lean, agile, velocity, all that type of stuff. What if that child is highly estrogen dominant and they're designed to be a 400-pound deadlifter, right? So if you know the goal and you know what's blocking you from the goal, then you intervene. But now you actually know what to do, as opposed to yelling and screaming and getting frustrated. You're like, okay, well, this kid's making too much estrogen. Why don't I get them some DIM, a broccoli extract, which slows the CYP19A1 gene down, and all of a sudden they're making less estrogen, and they start to lean out, and they start to have leaner, stronger muscle fiber, and they have more velocity all of a sudden, and they start to behave like a soccer player, right? So it's a little bit of discovering who you are, like you said, self-discovery, and now there's two paths. do I utilize my strengths and superpowers and be that person? Or is there a particular goal I need to get to? And now I know what my obstacles are and I can intervene.
So with intervention, is there ever a time where it's too late to know?
No, because your DNA instructs biological process on a daily basis. So sorry, I should say yes, there is a too late if you've abused your body and caused a disease, right? And even that is not too late because if it's chronic, it's reversible. Once you get into stage 4, Alzheimer's, stage 4 cancer, a very different story. There's very acute work needed. But for the most part, chronic disease, if it's early stages, reversible. But there's a bit of a too late waiting until then to act. You should have acted earlier. But in terms of day-to-day maintenance, like suppose, I actually have like CEOs that I work with where they've been taught how to alter their personality on a day-to-day basis because they need to go to work and be that psychopath that they are, which is what drives them to lead teams and build stuff. But they also need to come home on the weekend and sit back and relax and not burden the family with their personality. So there's, if I know what's driving them, somebody might have what's called a serotonin dysregulation. So serotonin is a neurochemical that regulates mood, but it also helps the brain prioritize stimulus. So whatever you're hearing, seeing, smelling, how much do you actually see versus what you actually need to see? And some people can't prioritize. And so they end up having a much higher level of detail in their perception because they're noticing everything. That makes them very anxious and people see them as anal, like they're picking at every little detail that they don't need to. Now, that's the thing that makes them an incredible leader and pulls everybody forward because they're never satisfied. Nobody's ever working at their pace and at that level of detail. But bring that home, constant friction and frustration because no one needs to elevate to that level, right? So 5-HTP, very well-known common supplement. 5-HTP will regulate serotonin. Tryptophan will regulate serotonin. GABA will regulate serotonin. So that person, it's never too late, can choose that I'm going on holiday for a week. I need to feel different, right? And guess what? 24 hours being off of those supplements, you go back to who you were. Your DNA, the very first thing you said, DNA doesn't change. The DNA you're born with is the DNA you die with. The epigenetics, the environment, the nutrition, lifestyle, the things you add will change the expression of your DNA temporarily, so long as that input is there. Take it away, you go back to where you started. So it's never too late. Hormones, mood, sleep, diet, because as soon as you make the change, your genes will change as long as the change is there.
It's fascinating because you talk about environment and work environment. You see people that are really happy on the weekend and miserable going to work. Or
Yeah,
people that are really happy in their work, but when there's not a lot of work, they're miserable.
yeah,
So it's the environment that's changed, which is reacting in there. There's something, my mum's a brilliant psychotherapist, still working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and she should have retired many, many years ago. But she deals specifically with childhood trauma and
yeah,
how that affects our whole life. There's a story you told about your niece, the
yeah.
discovery of a gene that was causing anxiety. I'd love for you to share that story because it really feeds into why it's so important and critical for parents to understand what their children are going through so we don't drug them up to only
Yeah.
lead to greater issues.
And first of all, the what's expressing and what you're seeing is not the starting point, right? The anxiety they're feeling didn't just happen. They don't have a disease. The depression is not, it just didn't just start. Usually chronic disease in general, whether it's a liver issue, kidney, heart, whatever, it takes a decade plus to get there. The body's resilient and fights this stuff. It fights inflammation, fights toxins, etc. But over time, you eventually may lose the battle because of the overburden of whatever's causing it, right? So in the context of my niece, yeah, she literally couldn't breathe, couldn't function. Typical anxiety attack, very aggressive one, be it that because it was like she literally couldn't breathe. So my friend who's a pediatrician confirmed over the phone this is exactly what an anxiety attack looks like. And he said, if it happens again, let me know. I said, okay. So it did happen about a month later, and this time she fell over and she hurt herself. She hit her leg on a table, and my mom, her grandmother, thought that she broke her leg. So I had to take her to a clinic. So I spent time there, blood tests, x-rays, whatever. They said nothing wrong, everything's good, blood work, x-rays, all good. But if it happens again, let us know. And that time I realized what that meant. I heard that statement twice, which was if it happens again, she's getting diagnosed with an anxiety condition. We're going to tell you what pill she has to take, and that's the solution. right? Next time she feels like her breath is elevating, take a pill. That's probably what's going on. So it did happen again. And this time she actually left a note that she was leaving home, can't deal with it, can't deal with the feeling, running away. And so my mom, my sister, and my niece live together in a condo building. So I drive over there, and she's literally just standing outside, not knowing what to do, running away from the feeling. She didn't understand what was happening to her, right? So when I asked her, like, just tell me, I'm your uncle. Is it school, bullying, something online? Like, why do you feel like this? Right? So her blank stare told me that she had no idea, other than the fact that she didn't feel good and just couldn't take it anymore. So it was at that moment that I dove into her DNA. I got my office to email it to me. I was sitting with her in the phone in the car looking at stuff, and I didn't look for anxiety. And this is how we generally approach things. And I think anyone that's looking at a single gene believes the disease is there. They're looking for a disease gene, right? So if somebody believes the disease is there, they're not going to be able to help you because they're not identifying the cause. So what
Sure.
I was looking for was cause. Why would she eventually, after 13 years of life, become like this? Because it wasn't there before, right? She didn't have it. It's not part of her. So when I looked at her hormone production, I saw a big red flag that she didn't make enough. And so I asked my mom at that time, you've been calling me, texting me somewhat like clockwork every month. Where was she in her cycle? And she says, you know what, now that you say it, right at the beginning, it was just about to happen or had just started, right? So having said all that, when you're in your beginning of your cycle, that's the point where your body is clearing all the hormones out. There's nothing left. There's no hormones in a woman's body to speak of, right? And she went into a much deeper valley. So when someone goes into a deeper valley, the outcome is some level of dysregulation to mood and other systems, right? But she had been having her cycle for a while. Why all of a sudden now did she express this intense anxiety issue? This happened during peak COVID in Toronto in the winter when we were in lockdown, and she hadn't been outside in 5 months, no sunlight. So I looked at her vitamin D genetics, and here's what I found. That the metabolism of vitamin D, taking D2 from the sun and converting it to D3, she had the worst version of the gene. Didn't do that job so well. She didn't make vitamin D enough properly. Then there's a second gene that takes that D3 you just made and transports it to the cell where you actually utilize it. She also had the worst version of that gene. Then there's a third gene that takes that gene that got to the cell and binds it and gets it intracellular where you actually need it, and it starts to do something. She had the worst version of that gene. So context, no sun for 5 months, worse vitamin D genetics. Put that together with her hormone, it exaggerates the way she feels. Last layer to the story, pleasure comes from dopamine. And I should say more specifically, satisfaction. So whether it's pleasure or it's reward, like achieving something or eating some food or doing something fun, dopamine is deployed, you feel it, and then all of a sudden you get that hit. Her dopamine genetics are the receptors are not dense enough, so she can't actually bind enough dopamine. It's hard for her to feel. And the clearance is a protein that gets it out of your brain to bring you back to normal. She had the fastest version. So she was already on any given day teetering on this world sucks, I'm depressed, can't get satisfied, never, or I'm a warrior seeking reward like her uncle, who has the same genetics, by the way, becoming entrepreneurial, right? Context will change the outcome, just like you said. So that combination at that time, at that COVID lockdown, in that day of her cycle, all the pieces came together to equal an anxiety crash. Already teetering there mentally, already teetering there hormonally, already bad vitamin D genetics. What was needed was the last straw of take the sunlight away. So now, what would have been an anxiety pill instead was high dose vitamin D and a supplement called L-theanine. L-theanine boosts dopamine levels. That was it. That was all I did with her. And the very next month, no problem. And it's been what, 2 or 3 years now? Never had the problem again. Right? So you can take any labeled chronic issue and reverse engineer it to this degree to figure out what caused it and then address the cause. And all these spokes of very how you feel are just symptoms of the hub, which is what really needs to be treated.
And how's she doing now?
Fine. She's like she literally was not doing her homework, not doing school, quitting, everything falling apart to now literally a month ago I drove her to university for an orientation of like walking around like she's thriving, you know?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
It's again because of my mother, I hear a lot the suicide rate in the
yeah,
young people now is higher than it's ever been. Not
yeah,
just there's more young people, but we're talking percentage wise.
yeah,
And the diagnosis, like you said, is put them on a drug. There's something I had a soccer coach that worked for me, Tim, great guy, had his daughter by marriage that was having all these violent attacks, going out attacking people, being angry. And we're talking about a young girl, 12, 13. And they got called. She had had this attack on someone at school, just being violent. So they picked her up, took her away, not Tim, took her away to the doctor. And the doctor says, we're going to raise the drugs again. It was like the sixth time they had raised. And he said, absolutely not. We're taking her home. And they said, then in that case, we're no longer going to allow her at the school. 3 weeks after going home, no drugs, completely removed, normal girl. Goes on,
yeah,
graduates high school, everything. And it's again, the drug was creating more of the issue than the
yeah.
solution. So, with that being said, and I know you brought up COVID, what is the effect that you've seen from either, those that have taken the vaccine or the effect of the mental side of isolation? Because we know that solitary confinement changes the brain, it changes your whole behavior. What have you found with that?
Yeah, I think that pre-COVID, anyone that I was working with or treating, it was like there was a problem to solve and we addressed the problem and they got better. Post-COVID, and not immediately, but I would say about a year ago, about a couple years post things winding down, um, things stopped working. And it's like, well, your DNA doesn't lie, so why isn't this working? And then I realized that when somebody is stuck in fight or flight, where your nervous system is engaged and elevated looking for problems because of a trauma, um, your body doesn't recover. So that you literally, it's very binary. You're either in fight or flight or you're in rest or recovery. Can't do both at the same time. And everybody, whether they know it or not, is stuck in this trauma expression post-COVID. When you go through 7, 8, 9, 10 months of complete uncertainty, where you don't know why it's happening, you lose control, right? And you don't know when it's going to be fixed. And these types of feelings, your body doesn't know how to reconcile that other than you must be going to battle. This is war. Because that's your body is designed for an ancestral context, not our current reality. So probably war. So going to war, let's turn on the fight or flight. Let's get you ready for battle. Let's get you engaged and activated, nervous system on edge, looking for every little thing, which means no recovery.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, there was zero ROI on, well, your hormones don't look good, let's fix this. Well, your detox don't look good, let's fix this. Yeah, a little bit of change, but the problem's still there. And then I switched to every single person I was working with. The first thing I dealt with was their nervous system and their trauma. And they would come to me saying, hey, I have breast cancer. I got to work on this. I'm like, yeah, that's great. We're going to do that. But first, I've working on your trauma. I don't have any trauma. That's what you think. Let's get into it. And we would always find it. We would always release it. We would always unlock it. And we would then be able to actually fix the problem after that. And when you look at the genetics of trauma, we don't all experience it the same way. And that's where some people, adrenaline, which is a thing that gets deployed during that traumatic moment, the way we bind and experience adrenaline is different. So some of us don't have an emotional recall. Some of us, when that person hurt me, and the next time I see them, I might make the same mistake again because there's no reminder, there's no trauma for me. Now, the expression of my DNA is holding on to trauma, but there's no visceral memory. So I'm still stuck in fight or flight. I just don't feel it. Then there's some people that really do recall and bind the information around the feeling that they felt. And for them, it's more of a burden. Like, I can't go there again. I'm never talking to that person again. I hold the grudge. I can't live in that neighborhood anymore. I got to move. Everything, it makes them feel as if it's a continuation. It's still going on. And I could spend an entire hour just talking about trauma and what we've learned genetically and what drives it. But it is nuanced and it is individual and unique for people. And when you get into that, you also unlock this thing for them. About 2 weeks ago, I was dealing with a lady who's been going to a therapist for 24 years because of what she experienced in her childhood with her dad. And he was just a alpha male to an extreme, expectations beyond anything that any child could handle, crazy trauma. In 1 2 hour session, we resolved what she couldn't resolve for 24 years with a therapist. Not because I'm the best therapist because we address the biology of what causes trauma. I wasn't concerned about the trauma itself. I was concerned that if you experience something that your body takes as trauma, it's going to turn on epigenetic expression to make sure you don't make that mistake again. And in that case, it's one of the few expressions that's somewhat permanent. Anything else, go eat some broccoli, your hormones are different tomorrow, but then they go back to what they were. Go take your supplements for your brain, they change for a day or two, then they go back to work. Trauma kind of stays on. Your body's really good at learning it, very hard to forget. So we really went into the mechanism of just turning it off. And 2 hours is gone, literally gone, you know? And so, anyways, there is something to be said about that's the big problem. That's the reality. That's the block. Because that's a block, I was forced to understand and learn it. And I have learned that the genetics behind how we experience these things is vastly different. And so we need unique solutions. But the good news is there is a solution for everybody.
So if somebody, say, goes and sees somebody and then that person upsets them and triggers the sympathetic system, and now they can't let go of it, and it carries with them for, week after week, and we see the effect of the trauma of one small conversation that may not have been true, but they kind of, is that something that could be addressed at a DNA genetic level?
Yeah. So there's one bit to that is knowing what's a trigger and then getting your nervous system in a state to better be able to deal with it. So there's devices that, for example, can send frequency signal into your vagus nerve to convince your body that you're actually safe and calm. The frequency of different states of the mind, like love, calm, happy, sad, mad, they've all been understood by neuroscientists now. So there's devices that can embed those frequencies into you so that your nervous system, your brain has no clue what's happening. It's relying on you to tell it through your thoughts. So a vibration or a frequency is a form of thought that will tell it, this is how you feel. So that's a kind of a band-aid to help you cope. But then there's work to be done on why is that person a trigger? What is the feeling or thought or what is the association to whatever the thing is that makes you feel bad, right? And how do we take that thing that right now you believe to be bad, which, in all justice to you probably is, but there's something in there that you could be thankful for. There's something in there that will allow you to forgive. And for most people, that's a concept that is very hard to swallow for what causes trauma. But when you talk through it and find it, it becomes so obvious. It becomes like this lady went from her dad causing her 24 years of trauma to her thanking her father in a single conversation because she realized what it gave her. And so all of a sudden, turn off.
Yeah, it's fascinating. My girlfriend was diagnosed with MS, has been
Okay.
great over the last number of years. Super athlete, no one would ever know that she was diagnosed with MS. And I say diagnosed because I know that you said 20% of women that you looked at that were diagnosed with MS actually didn't have it. But she went to her fifth neurologist, who turned around without even looking at her charts, go, "Oh, these are the only drugs that you're on?" Because, "Oh, we should have put you on more. You should be on higher. Look at what your lesions are. Look at these different things." My girlfriend was traumatized. And still to this day, and we're talking probably 4 or 5 months later, it still irks her. She's moved on a long way, but that moment changed her for 4 months in a downward spiral. Even though she knew the truth, it was just someone's opinion. It spiked it. And so this ideology of what you've proven that we can change through our addressing, the reaction that our DNA is having combined is brilliant. How many people could be helped with that to live a better quality of life and not waste the 24 years? It's not a waste because we learned from it, but the negative experience for 24 years.
Yeah, and we're seeing it, and I was not aware. I was not aware that even myself needed this work, right? It kind of culturally feels weak to even acknowledge the word trauma. But I would tell everyone here the ROI on resolving your nervous system and getting out of fight or flight, it's not just solving that problem, it's solving every other problem because everything you're doing to try and fix your body won't work if you're in fight or flight. It's just simple biology.
Yeah, it's something that I know I suffer with. When I look at my parasympathetic system and sympathetic, I
Yeah.
live in my sympathetic system. but we learn to function. That's the brilliance of the human body. Like you said, the resilience that we have, we
Yeah.
still learn to fight, but are we excelling where we could be? So some of the things that we go through, I'm gonna just list a bunch of things out.
Sure.
And if there's anything you want to stop or bring back in, but from DNA, and it can just be a single yes answer. DNA will help with gut health,
Yeah, for sure.
brain health,
Big way. Yeah.
preventing or fighting disease,
Yes.
autism,
Yes, for chronic cause autism. For innate, which is a tiny fraction, the majority is cause, which is why the numbers are so high. One day there'll be genetic therapeutic for what's really autism, but the vast majority, yes.
cancer,
Cancer, yes, for some cancers. There's some cancers that are genetic, meaning that they're going to happen, right? But that's again a tiny fraction. The majority, I think the current number is 93% or 94% are again caused. So the vast majority, yes.
Alzheimer's,
Yes. If working on it early is important, but yes.
dementia,
Same answer, same thing, especially and more important for women as well.
Parkinson's,
This is an interesting one because Parkinson's, um, we used to believe was a genetic condition, meaning it's coming. It's nothing you can do. We now know that the vast majority, what is labeled as Parkinson's today, which is why the numbers are so high compared to what they used to be, is again caused. There's a lawsuit happening right now where there's 13,000 farmers in the US that are suing Chevron because of a chemical that they used as a pesticide in farming of plant proteins like beans and chickpeas and lentils called paraquat. And the paraquat is neurodegenerative, and they all ended up with Parkinson's. So what that means is they ended up with the symptoms of what we call Parkinson's, but Parkinson's is a very real thing. What I'm saying is today, the majority of what matches those neurodegenerative symptoms is caused and not innate, which means yes, we can work on it.
if they're using that as the pesticides and then we're consuming that food, is that also going to be affecting the majority of people that in the population that are eating that?
Yes, unfortunately. And this is a very unique American problem. Yeah, I can't tell you how many things of this nature are used in the US that are illegal in most of the other parts of the world. China won't import American bread or milk because American bread has something called potassium bromate in it, which is the same thing that you make a yoga mat out of. It's foam to make it soft. So it's illegal in China. American milk with all the hormones and chemicals that are used illegal in China. And forget about China, like most of the Europe, etc. So, anyways, um, yeah, it's a big problem. Let's just say that.
Do you see that changing anytime soon? Because we know it's money driven.
Yeah, so you have, I mean, if you look at just today, I was studying this thing about this new entity that's being launched around, food safety, etc. And if you look at the board members, it's big agriculture, big chemical, like that's who's running it. What are their motivations? So we have an FDA that's designed the same way. The FDA is the employees are ex-pharma people that's paid for by pharma. The FDA openly does not regulate. There's a famous interview with a governor from California a senator from California who was interviewing one of the directors of the FDA, grilling her about all these products, saying, well, we don't regulate that. But what if we found that this causes cancer in babies? That's not what we do. So what do you do? 18,000 employees of the FDA, what do they do? We don't really know. But I do see that if any time change is coming, it's coming now because of the wave of information. The stuff I used to talk about on Instagram 2 years ago, people didn't even believe me. Now I hear hundreds of people talking about it. So the change should be coming, I think.
So what makes you angriest then? I mean, when you're looking at human health, and maybe I shouldn't use the word angry, but I know part of the drive is trying to help people, and we see it's not just people accidentally, they're being driven to
Yeah.
less health. What's the one thing that really makes you the angriest in?
Well, I would say that it's so obvious that it's intentional, right? It's not a mistake. It's not just straight out corruption of some sort. It is intentional, planned, coordinated. Let me give you an example. Um, so when the COVID vaccine came out, what was the big need? Emergency use authorization. You know, it was very early, so nothing like that would have been approved if it wasn't an emergency. And the technical need for emergency use authorization is that there's no other viable solution. So we, as an emergency, need this problem solved, right? So having said all that, some people were taking ivermectin and having a lot of success. Ivermectin is a Nobel Prize winning medication that at that time had been prescribed to over 300 million, well, I shouldn't say 300 million people, 300 million times to people, right? Maybe multiple doses. So 300 million doses provided to humans to kill viruses back, sorry, mostly parasites, I would say, and viruses. It's also cheap. On the same day, every news channel I could see came out saying conspiracy theorists are taking a horse dewormer thinking that it's going to help them and it's actually going to kill them. And it's very true. Ivermectin is used to kill parasites, which it also kills in humans, in horses at a much more aggressive dose. Why were people getting a horse dewormer? Because it was taken off the shelf everywhere, and the hack was go buy it from a veterinarian and just reduce the dose that you take. So I know this, right? And at that time, it was very easy for me to figure out that 300 million doses of this stuff had been provided, that it was Nobel Prize winning, that it saved lives all over the planet. Then if every single media outlet everywhere was saying the same thing at the same time about it, that is planned, coordinated, and intentional. So that's what irks me the most, is that this is what we're up against, where it's just a lie. It's literally just a lie. It's something that, imagine something could have saved lives was not the priority.
Mhm.
And not only that, it was demonized. And the people that used it were demonized.
Yeah. So with the actual vaccine that they wanted, was it pushed for a financial reason? Was it pushed for a human altering reason? Because we hear many different sides of what goes on with within the vaccine, and there were obviously different strains of it. But what was your knowledge gain from that?
The challenge is I'm still trying to understand what happened, but every conspiracy theory is coming true. So all of it is happening. From people dying to people having ongoing chronic conditions that are very profitable to odd things happening with DNA. So all of it seems to be true. You know, that you mentioned athletes before. I posted an article and put out news about why all of a sudden athletes are collapsing from heart failure, and no doctor wanted to talk about it. But it's so obviously true, which is if you add something to someone's body that causes inflammation to the cardiovascular system, which we now know is true, it was debated and debunked before, but now it's proven true, right? And if you have that person in peak adrenaline, so most people that die in their sleep will die between 3 to 6 a.m. because that's when you are at peak adrenaline production, right? So now when you have adrenaline, it's a vasoconstrictor, which if you already have an inflamed and struggling cardiovascular system, the arteries, the actual vasculature, and then you add vasoconstriction to that, then all of a sudden this blood flow is constricted and it's challenging, which is when you're playing a sport, top adrenaline rush, right? Now sprinkle on top of that a 19 to 22-year-old male who's at peak testosterone levels. Testosterone is a major anti-inflammatory inhibitor. So it's a perfect storm. Add something to damage the cardiovascular system, put someone in a context that they're peak adrenaline, and put them at an age where they're a peak not ability to deal with inflammation in the moment. It's going to lead to exactly what we saw. And the logic of this was so simple, but when I put it out there, it was like debunk, debunk, debunk. But now it's all true, true, true. Right. So yeah, and there's so much more I could say about it, but I'm still trying to understand what's really going on, but it's definitely not what the mainstream said it was.
A lot of people will hear that and get a little fearful because either hundreds of millions were vaccinated.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can do? And some were obviously triple, quadruple boosted and continuing to the system. Knowing that you had that and looking at the effect within the biological system, is there anything someone could do that took it that they could say, okay, I took it, it hasn't affected me, but is there a course of action to now, I can't reverse it, but to make myself healthier?
So I didn't have a vaccine, but I got COVID twice, and it gave me crazy brain fog to the point where speaking to someone like this on a literally, I was in LA on a live set doing a podcast, and I couldn't remember what the guy was asking me in the moment. So I was just winging my way through this interview, like I had no clue what was going on. So I realized the brain fog is real. So I created a cocktail for myself, and it worked. And then I started giving it to some of my friends, and then I had some friends that were vaccinated, not doing well. They started getting better. And so our patients started asking for it because I talked about it on a podcast like this. Like they said, well, how'd you deal with the brain fog? And I talked about it. So anyway, so I actually created something which was not, we never even talked about this. So it was no intention to talk about it today.
Sure.
But I created a product that takes all of what we need to deal with the majority of the post, whether long haul or vaccine injury type issues, which is nattokinase because it thins the blood. But I found when I was looking for nattokinase that there was a high variability in price point. And so I was trying to understand why. So nattokinase comes from natto, which is Japanese. It's a Japanese protein, plant protein. And but it thins the blood and it's really good for cardiovascular health in general, which is one of the reasons why there's so low cardiovascular health issues in Japan compared to the US. They eat natto for breakfast every day, right? So what I found was the reason there was a variability in price point, I spoke to the Japanese government and they put me on to what was called the Nattokinase Association. They're so serious about natto that they have a government entity that just manages natto. There's one food product, right? And they told me that most of it's fake. And the only stuff that's real is NSKSD certified. Then you know the Japanese government certified it. So I found a supplier for that. Then I found bromelain. Then I found NAC. Then I found some quercetin, and I put all the right stuff in there at the right dosage, which is very important to kill spike protein, to support inflammation, to allow the endothelium to heal to some degree, and to support to support the blood clotting. And I got better in about 2 months. So it's available. I can share a link with you. Um, I don't make that much of it because I only make it for my own patients, but it's available on the site. There's normally not that much available, but it's there.
No, it's brilliant. It's I had COVID 5 times,
Oh, wow.
and I also wasn't vaccinated.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't have brain fog, but I'd also come out of a serious brain injury where part of my brain had died, and I had to learn to talk again. This was back in 2018, learn to function, and became fascinated with the brain. That's really where my journey of today started. But no, it's fascinating. With the effect of COVID, obviously, we know that there's mental health issues that have come from it, whether it's from isolation, fear, like you said, of living in this constant state of fight or flight. And we see it around the world now where we're so disconnected as communities. Is there the group that you put together of all these different ingredients, does that help calm down as well?
Different problem. No, I think the first step is someone needs to address trauma itself and acknowledge that they're suffering a trauma because of what they went through. Then second step is to, on a day-to-day basis, deal with calming. So ashwagandha, GABA, L-theanine, adaptogens, nootropics even. There's a lot of ways to calm your brain down. Breath work is one of the most powerful. Then there's devices like Apollo Neuro. There's something called a Hulis, which you can actually put right onto your vagus nerve that sends these sort of frequencies into your vagus nerve. So overarching, address the trauma to deal with winding down the volume on the trauma in your body. But day to day, do all the other stuff I said to just give you what you need in the moment.
Fascinating. So I'm going to go back to the list, just yes or no's, and you
Yeah,
can.
sure.
So we covered Parkinson's, MS.
MS. So MS is a genetic condition. So what we can do is if we determine that someone, this is especially true for women, that they don't actually have MS, then they can be resolved. If they do, it's a genetic condition that we can't help.
Stroke survivors or someone that's prone to a stroke.
Yeah, we can predict. I have a story about that also, one of my friends. But we can predict and prevent. And for someone that survive, we can support regeneration. Like how do you repair the nervous tissue?
Tell me your friend's story.
So this guy was built, he literally looks like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, right? He literally built the same way. I think he's from a similar background. So he just looks that like, and he's ripped and, very successful businessman, very healthy, never drank, never smoked, right? Like nothing, very clean. And when this was an early stage when we were in our research phase, so it was all friends and family, they were going through stuff. So when I saw his DNA report, I saw some stuff going on with his endothelium, so the health of the cardiovascular system, some stuff with blood clotting, some stuff with vasodilation, etc. And it just equaled a stroke. And he was at the age where it was about to happen. And so literally called his wife, my business partner at the time, called his wife to say, we got to deal with this more. This is not just me learning my DNA. Like, let's come in and talk about this cardiovascular health stuff because something may happen soon. And she said, well, he's not available because he just had a stroke, you know? Yeah. And so he was out. Like, and they were just shocked because all of his habits were incredible. Was not doing anything that a doctor would say would cause it. And so a doctor would just say it's genetic. But what does that mean? We still have to understand what caused it. And so we found all the pieces that caused it. And now I was able to give him a plan as a friend for how to support those broken parts of his biology so that it never happens again.
So is blood work really important to do along with the DNA testing?
Blood work is a measure in time. It's like, where am I at today? But if you don't know why, what are you going to do about it? Blood work is designed to prescribe medication, right? There's a range, and if you're out of the range, there's a pill. And nowhere in there do you figure out what got you out of the range. So I think blood work is a great way to measure success and like see that things are getting better. It's a great way to know that there's an emergency. But the solution to blood work is medication, right? So for me, understand I can ignore every symptom, every disease, every problem. If I just deal with the biology, that was the cause. So everything comes from there. So let's just deal with that. And then the symptoms, the blood work, none of that matters.
So effectively, if somebody wanted to come in and do the DNA test with you, they would get that done. Would they then get blood work done afterwards to see where they're starting and then see with the changes whether their blood work's going, but they wouldn't use
Some
the.
people do. Yeah, some people do, especially if I'm working with someone who's more like say like a executive type thing, right? So I don't think it's necessary because you're gonna know how you feel, right? You're gonna know the eczema is gone, the headaches are gone, I have energy all of a sudden, I'm sleeping better. One of the first things that usually gets fixed is sleep. Um, and so feeling great is health, right? Not having headaches, not having low energy, that's health. And blood work doesn't measure that stuff, right? But at the same time, there are very specific disease markers, diabetic, cardiovascular inflammation that are useful to know.
This is again coming back really to people see this as an annoying lifestyle change because they've got into the habits of this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is how I live. I wake up, I have my coffee, I do all the different stuff. If I learn stuff, then I'm gonna have to change my lifestyle. Is it really that much of a big change? Because all you're doing is replacing one thing with another.
There may be some oddball things where like you just can't do this, and there are going to be some like, for example, telling the athlete that they should not be doing cardiovascular activity. There may be things like that. But for the most part, what we're saying is you already have habits. You already eat, you already exercise, you already take supplements, you already have relationships. What if we just did all that stuff exactly in the way your body needed to happen? You're kind of guessing what you're supposed to eat. You're kind of guessing what supplements you need. Some things make you feel different, great. For the most part, it's like, well, this podcast says it's going to make me last 10 years longer, so I'll take it, right? But how do you know? So in all of that stuff, yeah, I think it's like remove the trial and error and come with a more individual plan.
Yeah, because my test came back. I race bikes. That's my passion. And it's
Yeah, oh,
my
cool.
workout should be 80% weight training and 20% cardio. And yet I'll
Yeah,
be out racing for 2.5 hours on a bike at a very
yeah,
high level. And yet it's not what I'm genetically
yeah,
dispositioned toward. We both agree that people should be living to at least 120 or older. There's a lady in Mexico who just passed away, 128. And as you said earlier about the blue zones, we're expiring 2/3 of the way through our life. And that may not even be our quality of life. That's actual death. Tell me about aging and the 120 that you.
yeah. So step one, what is aging, right? Aging is everything we've been talking about, from stress to environmental exposures to food, etc. When you make choices that are not aligned to you, your DNA and your cells actually take physical abuse and get damaged. So the DNA gets oxidized. It literally gets wear and tear. The cells start to unravel, and that inward damage expresses outwardly as aging. Your skin changes, your hair changes, your vision changes, mitochondrial function gets down. So that's aging. Now, if you look at the physical structure of DNA, there's a protective cap on the DNA called a telomere. And
Mm.
this is a tool that's often used to understand biological age, like how long are my telomeres. And these telomeres we now know, are designed to last 120 years. So on the average, a human by design is meant to last 120 years. Or otherwise, why would the caps last that long? So there's a study that Harvard did, which is somewhat laughable, but it really tells you how easy it is to make changes. So there's it's actually the largest and longest ongoing health study that the world has seen. It started in the 1930s and it's still going on, where they're essentially saying, let's take people that live like 90 plus and try and figure out what are they doing different. And here's the 5 things they came up with. Don't smoke, no more than 3 drinks a week, eat healthy, clean food, don't be obese, and exercise 3 times a week. And these people, instead of hitting the average American life expectancy of late 70s, 78 for a woman, 76 for a man, they got to 90. So these 5 things are what it took to get someone from 78 to 90, which makes you realize how easy it is to get to 120 if you did everything right. So we're already born with the gift of 120. That's a given. You have to do some things to reduce that age. The choices you make between what you eat and breathe and the stress from relationships and all, that's what takes years away. So if you do everything right and you always made the right choice, 120 is already there for you as a gift. You don't need to add stuff to get there. You already have it. It's more about removing what's taking years away. So that's my belief around aging, is that my DNA will tell me what choices I'm supposed to make. And if I stick to that, I'm not causing the damage, the oxidation, the wear and tear that leads to aging. And in fact, if I'm in 30, 40, 50-year-old range or 60, whatever it is, I can probably get back 10 years from where I'm at today, because the body is quite regenerative and heals very quickly. So it's very easy to reverse wherever you're at. Also, if you start to all of a sudden follow this path of always making the right choice.
Yeah, it really goes in, like you said, one of the areas that you talked about earlier was the environment that you're in. And when we look at
Yeah.
Western society, 24/7 work, stress, trying to keep up with the Joneses, all the different stuff. A lot of these places that I see, the blue zones, are people that live their, if I want to say happy life, they're not chasing things. They're living for the moment, but also in an environment that's feeding their own biological need.
Yeah, they don't live to work, right? They work to live. And it's there we have American culture is not a human culture, right? It is designed for the progression of capitalism. That's what it's designed for, which is not a bad thing. I'm an entrepreneur, right? But I've learned that there's what I thought was a waste of time, and being guilty for unproductive was me hurting myself. And I don't have to have it just because I think I'm as smart as Bill Gates and I should be able to get to the same level, doesn't mean that what the level he got to, that every other place where he was meant to reach an optimal level that he did,
Sure.
right? There's many other places where he's maybe struggling. He has man boobs, right?
Right.
He has gynecomastia. I don't want to look like that at his age. So there's not one single goal, which is what we believe there is. And so yeah, so learning that if you look at people that have actually got to those ages, they are not taking 100 supplements a day. They're not going to the gym 6 days a week, right? They're not listening to every podcast. And I do those things. So I'm not saying that those things are bad. I'm saying that those things are what should be extending your life, not getting to what you already have. We're aiming for what we already have, right? And so it's more about take away the things that are taking years away.
Yeah, again, like you said earlier, with the Japanese, waking up with a purpose, having a reason.
Yeah.
Reason the word expire rhymes with retire, because
Yeah.
when we stop having a purpose and going, but also the environment that we're in will determine for sure our peace unless we're extremely resilient to not get included in it. What does someone do then if they're living in this high stress world that's also providing the lifestyle they like, but they're feeling sick? Is it something you can adapt, or do you have to really change your whole career?
No, so and everything, it's the same answer. Here's your DNA, here's what you're capable of. Now, it's either you go follow that to a T, or there's a specific goal which is not aligned, in which case you have to add something to be able to meet that. So if you are not wired for, like if you have bad endothelial health or you have bad neurochemical health and stress is not the best idea for you, but you also have big dreams and a big vision and you don't want to let that go, or the family's dependent on you, whatever the reason may be, then you need to make sure that there's time set aside for breathing, for supplementation, for cold plunging, for red light therapy, for what are the things that are going to mitigate the damage you're causing. And then you can go do it. Like, you know, a F1 car driving around has a pit crew that gets it back into shape for the next few laps, right? And but if you didn't, the tire explodes at some point.
Sure.
So you can go ahead and operate the level, but if you're not designed to, which is step one to even understand, you need to add things to make sure you can maintain that.
No, it's brilliant. Again, the whole purpose of us doing this meeting today is to try and reach those that have no idea about the
Yeah.
DNA. It's not trying to reach the biohacking world that are already aware of it. This is hitting people. If someone has spent their life drinking excessively, doing drugs, partying, living up what they thought was the lifestyle, what will be the effect on the catch up over time?
There's more work to do, right? You're dealing with a bigger mess. So now the good news is the worse the problem, the more you feel the relief, because the more acute it is, the more sensitive you are to like things getting better. So I'm dealing with a woman right now who's a well-known person that comes from a wealthy family, who we've been working for 3 months. And she's like, I don't feel that different. I was like, because you're already in the best possible health you could be. Like, we're just trying to make sure you don't make mistakes. So when you're already optimal, how much better could you feel? There may be a little bit more energy, a little bit more libido, a little bit more glowing skin, but you're already doing great versus somebody coming in, as you described, on day one, looking to turn things around. The outcome is going to be incredible. In first month, they're going to feel like a superhuman, right? But it doesn't end there. There's a good, if you go to a good functional medicine doctor, they'll tell you that a true healing journey takes 2 years to find the best version of yourself for the average person who hasn't already been doing everything, right? So it takes 2 years to get you to your best, but I believe using your DNA, you can cut that in half because now all of a sudden you're removing the trial and error. You're just doing exactly what you need to do, and the plan is for you, not a general plan.
No, brilliant. Well, I'd like to finish this with you. What would you like to say to somebody that was questioning whether this is for them?
Uh, there's a practical answer, and then there's a more theoretical answer. The practical one is, we have you attended my webinar, right?
Yeah.
Attend and hear and listen and just hear actual stories of actual patients, right? And see what they've been through. So that's the sort of practical answer is proofs in the pudding, and we've done it thousands of times. Um, I've trained hundreds of clinicians, our company's trained thousands. They're all using it. They wouldn't keep coming back if their patients weren't feeling better, you know? But the more theoretical answer is you're you're in a and this is it's no fault of anybody here because we're taught go do what you want, eat what you want, breathe what you want, and if something breaks, it's the doctor's job to fix you. So we believe there's a security in the doctor has the answer. Talk to someone who has had to spend time in the healthcare system after they break themselves and ask them how satisfied they are with what they're getting. And ask them why are they still in the healthcare system? It started at some point, but why didn't it end? If a prescription works so well, why do you need to keep refilling it? So just know that the alternative, which is I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to take care of my health. I'm not going to investigate. I'm not going to be proactive. I'm not going to prevent. The alternative is I'm going to rely on a team that is never going to ask what caused this, only tune the pain down or manage a symptom, and that's the measure of success. Measure of success is there's a measure in blood, like you said, that tells me the symptom has been reduced, but I have no clue what I did that I'm probably still doing that caused it that's going to just cause something else. That's not a way to live, man. That is, and that is and it's no fault of anybody listening. I understand this is what we've been told we're supposed to do. We're told that there's a security, and this is why also exploring things like this, there may be resistance because it's like, well, you're not a doctor. Well, did your doctor get you this kind of answer? Why are thousands of people coming to our company? They've already been to the doctor. So why? So I would just say that know that there is a path, that there's so much more than diagnose and prescribe. There's so much more than what is my disease called and when is the pain reduced.
Mm.
There is truth to I can figure out why it happened. And that is a much more powerful way to approach your health.
Love it.
Yeah.
One more thing to go back to, I just missed out on my list that I know is huge, autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
Tell me about autoimmune disease, the effect from our DNA, and is there a way to either reverse it, remove it, or make it stronger?
So once again, 80% women, much more likely, hormone related, stress related, gut related, the roots. Let me give you a simple example of a root cause. There's a gut detox process that's driven by a gene called GSTM1. So glutathione is an antioxidant that your body uses to remove toxins, and this gene drives glutathione in your gut. Now, if you have good genetics here, the thinking would be, I do a good job of detoxing in my gut. But that is based on your DNA, assuming you're still a cave person, that your DNA doesn't know what year it is and what the world looks like now. It's designed for a cave person and that reality, which means that once in a while when you ate something problematic or a moldy plant or some rotten meat, you would do well while somebody else would have gotten sick. It did not mean that in the United States, where everything you eat is toxic poison, constantly driving a detox response, leading to the body developing, antibodies to start to fight itself, and thyroid tissue happens to look like some of the breads and grains that your body's trying to fight, that it doesn't understand, that are so toxic because of the chemicals that are on them, not because of the grains itself. So those antibodies are designed to attack that type of tissue. So that's one of many examples of here's a reason, not the thing, not you have autoimmunity. Here's why. Because you have a hyper detoxing gut, and your gut is now being put in 2024, and you didn't understand that you needed to eat super, super clean food. You've now developed these antibodies. Your body's now under attack with autoimmunity, and your thyroid was the first card to fall.
So by understanding that's going on, you can actually have a program to help
Yeah.
reverse it.
You can now either reverse or prevent. Reverse looks like how do we heal the gut? How do we signal to the body that these antibodies aren't needed anymore? Things are good. And it always starts with the root, the central hub. Like, why did I get here? And if I fix that, then the body's going to stop doing what it's doing.
Fantastic. What you've done, Cash, is changing the world. And I know we all want to leave a legacy, and yours is already left, even though I know you've got so much more. What is next for you?
So next, in terms of advocacy, I don't think that'll ever stop because the world needs to know. But it's two more things. I think in as much as DNA is our human instruction manual, like you were talking about blood work, etc., I think all of that needs to be replaced. And instead of guessing with ranges, I know that I can measure the frequency of everything I need to know in the body, from organ health to parasites, to nutrients. So if I can be that precise, imagine how much I can impact decisions people need to make. So that's one thing I'm working on right now. You know, the second thing I would say is the more I look at why people get sick, it's food, it's environmental factors, it's hormone disruptors. So the solution, the people that are affected the most are least able to afford the solution.
Right.
That's a big challenge. So the people that are the sickest, that are the most exposed, that have jobs, that have locations, etc., that are the most damaging, don't have the economic status to deal with it. So the next thing I realized, in as much as my purpose is to help, I can't just help the people that can afford to work with me. I have to help everybody. And so I'm working on that also. So those are the two next big things I'm working to truly walk the talk, which is I want things to change.
Brilliant. I love it. All I can say is thank goodness you got sick, because when it comes to us is also a gift if we look at it in the right way and then realize the impact we can have from our own suffering to not only elevate ourselves, but everybody else. And again,
Yeah,
like your mother, incredible, what you've changed her life. I've been fortunate enough to do the same with my own mother, who suffered from
amazing.
stroke. And there's nothing better than giving life back to those that gave you life. And we
That's
can do
amazing,
that
man.
there. Thank you so much.